So that's kind of just a brief overview of how the tool works. So first topic we wanted to talk about for a few minutes was on updating scenarios for the next quarter. We get questions a lot from people who are currently using the tool and might have done a run of it a couple months ago, and now they're ready to update it, whether you're updating it on a monthly basis or whether you're updating it on a quarterly basis, which right now is another, like many other things in CECL. I think we're going to use the word, Greg, we'll probably use the word subjective a lot today in our talk for sure. And but we find during 2022, running it or rerunning it on a quarterly basis when there's a lot of new data available is probably all that needs to be done. But certainly the tool can be updated on a monthly basis if it's something you want to start tracking in parallel on a monthly basis. But let me just walk through the steps of how you're going to update the tool, and then I'll share the interactive website, and we'll walk through actually taking an entire scenario that you ran a couple months ago, pushing all the data forward to this month, making the proper updates, and then resaving it as a new scenario. So again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do a new parallel run. You certainly can create a new scenario completely from scratch if you so desire. However, you probably spent a good deal of time your first time around calculating your warms, intelligently going through your segment by segment and making qualitative factor adjustments, both internal and external, plugging in some information about individually assessed loans, and then managing some of the unfunded commitment section. So you don't have to redo that work each time. You can pull up an old scenario and then follow these steps. The first step is, do you need to update your warm calculations? Totally subjective at this point. It's a bit of a trial and error process. And what we tell people is, I would start by recalculating your warms on a quarterly basis. You certainly don't need to redo the entire warm calculations on a monthly basis, because there's just not going to be enough movement in your portfolio to have any real significant change in the warm calculations month to month. So I would start by doing it quarterly. And if you find after 2 or 3 quarters of recalculating your warms that they're changing by 1 basis point or 2 basis points, then you probably have enough information to say, hey, let's just go ahead and do this semi-annually so we don't waste any time. Certainly up to you, but I would start by doing it quarterly. Second step is rolling the historical data to the most recently available. If you have crossed that quarterly threshold, right, where we have an entire new data, quarter of historical loss data on the entire industry, not just your bank, but all your peers, you're going to want to make sure that we push that data from last quarter to this quarter, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Third step is just revisiting qualitative factor adjustments, right? Since the last time you ran it, you're going to go through segment by segment. You're going to look at the narrative that you built around those qualitative factor adjustments and decide whether you think anything needs to be modified because of changes in the environment, the economy, or in your own credit picture. Step 4, enter current loan balances. So that's one of the most important steps that you make sure you cannot you take in updating a scenario, is you always want to plug in your current loan balances in the summary tab, because that defines the as of date, right? That defines the date that the CECL calculation is as of when your current balances are. And then finally, if any individual assessments need to be adjusted. So let me go ahead and share my other screen here so you can watch us kind of walk through that. Give me just a second. Okay. Greg, can you see my browser now? You're muted.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I went ahead and kind of created a scenario. This is a sample bank we're using. It's a larger community bank based up in Maine. And this is a scenario that they might have created as of November 30th, right? They came in here 3 months ago, and they used September 30th industry loss data, and they had their balances plugged in as of November 30th. So here's all their data, their warms, their qualitative factor adjustments, their current balances as of November 30th, and the entire analysis is as of November 30th. Now, if I were to want to update this, again, first step, check those WARMs and decide whether you think they need to be modified or not. The second step, and this is one of the more critical ones, I go to the historical analysis and I'll see now that all the look back periods end are as of September 30th. That's because when we ran this, that was the most recent data available. Now, let's say it's January 30th, right? You're running this now as of either January 30th, and we know the 12/31 data is available. So we come into the historical analysis and we want to push the whole data set into the next quarter. So I come right here to what's called set common date range, and I roll everything forward to 12/31 being the end of a look back period. Apply changes. It'll take just a couple seconds, and you'll see here all of these blue bars, right, which represent our look back periods for each segment. They all just shifted to the right by 1 quarter. So now all of our historical loss experience for our bank is pushed forward to include the more recent 12/31 data point. You'll also notice whenever we make changes to the look back periods for our historical data, the peer data is always in lockstep. It syncs up in real time immediately. So as soon as we change the look back periods to include the 4th quarter for the bank, it also now includes the 4th quarter for every other bank in the peer group. We will talk about peer group, what I mean by when I say peer groups and how do we customize peer groups in a couple minutes. That's the next little topic that we want to cover. Hold on one second. Okay, yeah, I'm also reading questions as they come in here to make sure that there aren't any that I want to tackle at the moment. I think I sort of already answered one of them right just a second ago, and then the other one I think we'll get to in a couple minutes. But now that we've sort of rolled the clock forward for all the historical loss data, we want to go in and make sure our qualitative factor adjustments are still appropriate, right? So we go to the Q factors tab and we say, all right, here are all the qualitative factor adjustments we made a couple months ago. We made a slight adjustment on first liens for the peer experience and for economic adjustments. And then maybe we made some adjustments to non-farm, non-residential, the CRE stuff, because of a slight deterioration in average credit scores. This is just a hypothetical, of course. And we have these adjustments and we've built our narrative, right? We've come in here to the notes section and we've discussed and described why we came up with these adjustments based upon the peer data, based upon economic trends. And now just a couple months later, we're just gonna look at these and check them off and go kind of work our way down the list and say, do these all still make sense? Are they all still reasonable or do they need to be modified? And then you modify them as necessary. Next is individual assessments, right? If we had a handful of loans that we needed to cull from the herd and manage on an individual basis because default is imminent or we have a very well-defined loss that we might take on the credit, then we come in here and make sure that these calculations or assessments are still accurate. And once we've done that, the last piece of the puzzle is to come right in here and plug in updated balances. So I'll plug in, these are going to be, of course, the last quarter. And so if we want this to be as of January 30th or as of February 15th, whatever is the exact date you want the calculation to be as of, you just override these quarter end balances with your current balances. And this is just an area for you to make note of the date that you're plugging these in so that when you come back to this later, you'll know. It's a reference point for users to know what the date is of these for these balances. And once you've done that, you'll go ahead and you'll want to resave it. You definitely don't want to resave it because then you've lost that old scenario. You've lost the historical integrity of that November scenario, which you always want to have, for historical reference. So you'll always want to save it as a new scenario, give it a new name and a new date. Sample talk with January 2022. Create that. So now we have an additional scenario and you can toggle between the old scenario and the new scenario at will. So that's a great thing about it. Using our tool, once you update it for the next month, the next quarter, if you want to, what's most important is how is it changed and why is it changed, right? So you can pretty much almost instantaneously toggle between the old and the new scenarios and see exactly how much it moved the needle, where you had increases in reserves in the portfolio, where you might have decreases. You can also export both and then compare them side by side. So if you wanted to take your new run of the tool and export it, let's say into an Excel environment, you can take all the summary data, export it to Excel, and then export the old one. And literally directly in Excel, you can create a differential worksheet if you wanted to, where you can compare and contrast the results between this month and next month, or this quarter and last quarter.